Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to share and subscribe the channel. The impact left Sean breathless, his body screaming in protest as he struggled out of the crumpled shell of his pod. His muscles ached and blood trickled from a cut above his brow, but he was alive. Sean's mind raced. He was stranded, his ship, his crew gone. A surge of panic clawed at his chest, but he forced it down. Focus and survive. A snap of a twig froze him in place. He spun around, heart pounding. "Who's there?" Sean demanded, his voice steady despite the fear creeping up his spine. The answer came not in words but in motion. A blur of red and blue burst from the shadows, slamming into him with unrelenting force. Sean hit the ground hard, the blade flying from his hand as he grappled with his attacker. Before he could process what was happening, a strong hand pressed him down, pinning him with humiliating ease. A sharp edge grazed his throat, a blade shimmering faintly in the dim light. "Move, move and I'll sever your fragile little neck," a voice hissed. Sean's breath hitched. The voice was female, low, commanding, and laced with scorn. He looked up, and his breath caught in his chest. The alien woman looming over him was stunning, but there was nothing soft about her beauty. Her skin was a deep luminescent blue, her crimson hair falling in wild waves around her shoulders. Dark, piercing eyes stared into his with predatory intensity. "What are you?" she demanded, her blade pressing slightly harder against his neck. Sean swallowed hard. "Human," he managed. "I mean no harm." She tilted her head, her expression shifting from anger to curiosity. "A human here? How amusing." She shifted her weight, straddling him as she kept the blade firmly in place. Sean's muscles tensed as he tried to move, but her strength was immense, her body as solid as steel despite its graceful form. "Let me go," Sean growled, his frustration bubbling to the surface. Her lips curled into a smirk. "You're in no position to make demands, little human. Do you even realize where you are?" Sean glared up at her, defiance in his eyes. "I don't care where I am. I'm not your prisoner." Her laugh was sharp, mocking. "Oh, but you are. And judging by your fragile frame and pitiful resistance, you won't last long." Sean clenched his jaw, refusing to let her words cut him. "Try me." Her smirk faltered for a moment, replaced by a flicker of intrigue. She leaned closer, her fiery hair brushing against his cheek as she studied him. She rose abruptly, yanking him to his feet as if he weighed nothing. Sean winced at the iron grip on his arm but refused to show weakness. "You're coming with me," she declared, binding his hands with a thin metallic cord that seemed to tighten with every movement. "If you're truly human, you'll be worth more alive than dead." Sean stumbled as she shoved him forward, her hand firm on his shoulder. "Where are you taking me?" he demanded. She ignored his question, her eyes scanning the forest with practiced precision. "Move," she ordered, "unless you want to see how long your fragile body lasts against the predators here." Sean bit back a retort, his mind racing. He didn't trust her, but he had no choice but to comply. Every instinct told him to fight, to resist, but her strength was overwhelming, her confidence unshakable. As they walked, Sean stole glances at her. Her movements were fluid, almost predatory, and there was a sharpness to her gaze that suggested she missed nothing. The forest began to thin, revealing a sprawling settlement nestled in the valley below. The structures were simple yet sturdy, built from stone and timber. Fires burned in central pits. The woman stopped abruptly, turning to face him. Her eyes burned with a mixture of challenge and amusement. "Welcome to your new reality, human," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Let's see if your fragile body can survive it." Sean's jaw tightened as he met her gaze head-on. "You might be surprised what I can handle." For the first time, her smirk faded entirely, replaced by a look he couldn't quite decipher. Without another word, she shoved him forward, leading him into the heart of the settlement. The settlement was a flurry of motion as Sean stumbled into its heart, guided, or rather, shoved, by the alien warrior. Their gazes were cold, appraising, and laced with disdain. "This is the human you found?" one of the aliens asked, stepping forward. He was taller than the woman holding Sean, with a hulking frame that screamed strength and brutality. "He's small." Sean bristled, but before he could retort, the woman cut in. "Small, weak, and fragile," she agreed, her tone dripping with mockery. She tightened her grip on Sean's arm, forcing him forward like a trophy. "But rare. A human hasn't been seen on Valora in decades. This one might be of use to us." The crowd murmured, their expressions shifting between curiosity and skepticism. "Use?" the larger alien scoffed. "He'll shatter before he can lift a blade." Sean jerked his arm away, glaring up at the towering figure. "Try me." The crowd fell silent, their attention snapping to him. Even the woman seemed momentarily taken aback by his boldness. Then she laughed. "You've got quite the mouth on you," she said, her eyes narrowing. "But words won't save you here, human." "Maybe not," Sean shot back, "but neither will underestimating me." The crowd erupted into laughter, though there was an edge of unease to it. The warrior beside Sean tilted her head, a flicker of intrigue crossing her face before her usual smirk returned. "Bold," she said. "Stupid, but bold." She turned to the larger alien. "Prepare the human for interrogation. I want to know why he's here and if anyone else followed him." "And if he lies?" the larger alien asked. Her smirk widened. "Then we'll see just how much his fragile body can endure." Sean's stomach churned, but he kept his expression neutral as the larger alien approached, seizing him by the arm and dragging him toward a stone building at the edge of the settlement. Before they disappeared inside, Sean glanced back at the woman. She stood with her arms crossed, watching him with an expression that was unreadable yet undeniably intense. The interrogation room was cold and dimly lit. Sean was forced into a chair, his hands still bound as the larger alien loomed over him. "Speak," the alien growled. "Why are you here?" "My ship crashed," Shaw said evenly. "I didn't plan on being here." The alien sneered. "Convenient. And should we believe you?" "Because I'd rather be anywhere else," Sean snapped, his patience wearing thin. The larger alien's fist slammed into the table beside him, the impact reverberating through the room. "Watch your tone, human." "Or what?" Sean challenged. "You'll beat answers out of me?" "Go ahead." The alien hesitated, clearly unprepared for Sean's defiance. Before he could respond, the door creaked open, and the woman entered. "Enough," she said, waving the larger alien away. He obeyed without question, casting a final glare before leaving. Sean met her gaze, his pulse quickening. Alone, her dominance was even more palpable. She leaned against the table, her dark eyes boring into his. "You're either very brave or very foolish," she said. "Which is it?" "Depends on the day," Sean replied. Her lips twitched as though suppressing a smile. "You speak as though you have a choice in this. Let me make one thing clear, you're in my world now, my rules." "Then why not kill me?" Sean asked. "If I'm so weak, why bother keeping me alive?" For a moment, she didn't answer, her gaze scanning his face as though searching for something. Finally, she straightened. "You're interesting," she said simply. "And useful, perhaps." Sean arched a brow. "Useful? How?" Her smirk returned, sharp and challenging. "You'll find out soon enough." Days passed, and Sean found himself dragged into a routine he hadn't agreed to. The woman, whom he learned was named Rihanna, assigned him to work alongside the warriors. Though his tasks were designed to humiliate, he was made to carry heavy loads, spar with aliens twice his size, and endure constant ridicule about his size and strength. "You'll break before long," Rihanna taunted one day as she watched him struggle with a particularly heavy beam. Sean set the beam down with a grunt, glaring at her. You'd like that, wouldn't you? She crossed her arms, her smirk widening. I'm waiting for it. But Sean didn't break. He gritted his teeth and pushed through every challenge, determined to prove her wrong. One evening, after a grueling day of work, Rihanna approached him as he sat by the fire, his body aching but his spirit unyielding. You're stubborn, she said, her tone almost impressed. Not stubborn, Sean replied, meeting her gaze. Just determined. Rihanna's smirk softened into something that almost resembled a smile. For the first time, Sean saw a glimmer of respect in her eyes, and it sent a surge of heat through him. Keep it up, human, she said, her voice low. You might just survive after all. As she walked away, Sean watched her, his mind racing. He wasn't sure what was happening between them, but one thing was certain, Rihanna was more than just his captor. She was his challenge, and he intended to rise to it. The sun dipped below the horizon. Sean stood on the outskirts of the settlement, his muscles aching from another day of backbreaking labor. The distant sound of laughter echoed from the central fire pit, where the warriors gathered to share stories of their conquests. Sean, however, had no place among them. His presence was tolerated, but he was an outsider, mocked, ridiculed, and seen as a curiosity at best. You're slow today, Rihanna's voice rang out behind him, sharp and taunting. Sean turned to see her approaching, her crimson hair catching the last rays of sunlight. I'm not a machine, Sean replied, his tone flat. No, she said, smirking. You're a fragile human. Remind me, how exactly do you plan to survive here when even the work tires you out? Sean clenched his fists, the frustration building inside him. Why don't you stop talking and find out? Rihanna raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by his defiance. Is that a challenge? It's whatever you want it to be, Sean said, stepping closer. I'm tired of your insults. If you think I can't handle myself, prove it. The fire in her gaze flared, and for a moment, Sean thought she might laugh. Instead, she tilted her head, her smirk fading into something more serious. Fine, she said. You'll join me on patrol tomorrow. We'll see just how capable you really are. The morning came too soon, the air crisp and tinged with the scent of dew-covered leaves. Sean followed Rihanna through the forest, his legs protesting with every step. She moved effortlessly, her body a blur of strength and grace, while Sean struggled to keep up. Try to stay close, she called over her shoulder. I won't slow down for you. I don't need you to, Sean shot back, though his breath was already coming in short gasps. They trekked through the dense foliage for hours, the silence between them broken only by the occasional chirp of alien wildlife. Rihanna seemed to know every inch of the terrain, her movements purposeful and precise. Sean, meanwhile, was forced to rely on his instincts, his every step a gamble. He stumbled more than once, earning sharp glances from Rihanna, but he refused to ask for help. Not bad, she finally said as they reached a clearing. Sean looked at her, surprised. Is that a compliment? Don't get used to it, she replied, her smirk returning. Their banter was cut short by a rustling in the trees. Rihanna's hand shot up, signaling for silence. Sean froze, his heart pounding as he scanned the forest. Stay behind me, Rihanna whispered, drawing her blade. Before Sean could argue, a group of rogue warriors burst from the shadows, their blue skin marked with tribal scars. They moved with deadly precision. Rihanna didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, her blade clashing against the nearest attacker's weapon. Sean watched in awe as she fought, her movements a deadly dance of strength and skill. But the numbers were against her. As more warriors joined the fray, Rihanna was quickly surrounded. Sean's instincts kicked in. Grabbing a fallen branch, he charged into the fight, swinging with all his might. His improvised weapon connected with one of the attackers, knocking them off balance. Sean! Rihanna shouted, her voice a mix of anger and disbelief. I told you to stay back. And let you handle this alone, he shot back, ducking under a blade. The battle was chaotic, the odds stacked against them. Sean fought with everything he had, his movements fueled by adrenaline and desperation. Though he lacked Rihanna's skill, his determination was unwavering. When the last of the attackers fell, Sean dropped the branch, his chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. Rihanna stood nearby, her blade dripping with blood. She turned to Sean, her expression unreadable. "You're insane," she said finally. "Maybe," Sean replied, wiping the sweat from his brow. "But you're welcome." Rihanna's lips twitched as though she were suppressing a smile. "You're reckless, stupid even, but," she paused, her gaze softening, "you're braver than I gave you credit for." Sean met her eyes, a flicker of pride swelling in his chest. "Told you I wasn't as fragile as you thought." For once, Rihanna didn't argue. Instead, she turned and began walking back toward the settlement. "Come on, human," she called over her shoulder. "You've earned your rest." Sean followed her, a small smile playing at his lips. For the first time since his arrival, he felt as though he'd proven something, not just to Rihanna, but to himself. The walk back to the settlement was silent, the tension between Sean and Rihanna palpable but different. She kept a steady pace ahead of him, her crimson hair swaying with each step, while Sean followed, nursing a fresh bruise on his shoulder from the fight. The forest began to thin, the glow of the settlement's fires visible in the distance. Sean expected the usual barrage of mockery and ridicule when they arrived, but to his surprise, the other warriors only stared. "He fought," Rihanna announced flatly, her tone leaving no room for argument. The warriors exchanged glances but said nothing. A few even nodded, their disdainful sneers replaced with faint, reluctant respect. Rihanna turned to Sean, her dark eyes locking with his. "Get yourself cleaned up. You'll need your strength tomorrow." Sean raised an eyebrow. "Another patrol already?" Her lips curved into a smirk. "No. You're sparring with me." Later that evening, Sean sat by the fire, tending to the small cuts and scrapes on his hands. The alien night was eerily quiet, the only sounds the crackling flames and the occasional rustle of leaves. He wasn't alone for long. Rihanna approached, her silhouette framed by the firelight. She held 2 steaming cups, one of which she handed to Sean without a word. "What is this?" he asked, sniffing the liquid. It smelled earthy and slightly bitter. "A tonic," she replied, sitting down across from him. "It'll help with the pain." Sean hesitated, then took a sip. The taste was sharp and unfamiliar, but he felt its warmth spreading through him almost instantly. "Thanks," he said, setting the cup down. Rihanna studied him for a moment, her usual smirk absent. "You surprised me today," she admitted. Sean leaned back, his gaze fixed on the fire. "You thought I'd run." "I did," she said bluntly. "Most would have." Sean shrugged. "I've never been good at running away." For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy but not uncomfortable, a strange sense of camaraderie settling between them. "What's Earth like?" Rihanna asked suddenly, her tone softer than Sean had ever heard it. He looked at her, surprised. "You've never been?" She shook her head. "No. Humans are rare in this galaxy, and the stories we've heard are fragmented. Tell me about your world." Shah hesitated, unsure where to begin. "It's complicated," he said finally. "Beautiful in some places, ugly in others. People are stubborn, always trying to outdo each other. But it's home." Rihanna tilted her head, her gaze thoughtful. "Stubbornness seems to be a defining trait of your kind." Sean chuckled. "You don't know the half of it." He went on to describe Earth in more detail, the towering cities, the sprawling forests, the oceans that seemed to stretch forever. He talked about humanity's ingenuity, its flaws, and its unyielding drive to survive. Rihanna listened intently, her fiery gaze softening as he spoke. For the first time, she seemed genuinely curious, her mocking demeanor replaced with something more vulnerable. "And what about you?" she asked. "What made you leave your world?" Sean hesitated. The question struck a chord, one he wasn't sure he was ready to confront. "I was searching for something," he said finally. "I thought I'd find it out here." "Did you?" He met her gaze, the firelight dancing in her dark eyes. "Not yet." Her expression flickered, as though his words had struck a nerve. She looked away, her usual guardedness returning. "We're not so different, you and I," she said quietly. Sean arched a brow. "Really? Because you've spent every waking moment reminding me how fragile I am." Rihanna smirked, though it lacked her usual bite. "True, but even the strongest warriors have cracks in their armor. Some are just better at hiding them." Sean studied her, seeing the faint shadows beneath her bravado. "What's your story, then?" he asked. Her smirk faded, replaced by a faraway look. "I was born into a warrior caste. Weakness is a death sentence in my world. You fight, or you're nothing. And you've been fighting ever since," Sean said. She nodded. "It's all I've ever known." For a moment, the weight of her words hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Sean felt a pang of understanding, a connection he hadn't expected. "You don't have to keep proving yourself," he said softly. Rihanna's gaze snapped back to his, sharp and unyielding. "You think you know me, human?" "No," Sean admitted. "But I think there's more to you than the warrior you pretend to be." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. Instead, she stood, her movements brisk and controlled. "Get some rest," she said. "Tomorrow will be harder." Sean watched her walk away, her silhouette disappearing into the shadows. The following morning, the settlement was alive with activity. Warriors moved purposefully through the camp, sharpening weapons and preparing for patrols. Sean stood in the training grounds. He rolled his shoulders, loosening the stiffness from yesterday's labor. Across from him stood Rihanna, her crimson hair glowing in the light, her blade glinting as she twirled it effortlessly in her hand. "You said you wanted to prove yourself," Rihanna called, her voice carrying over the din. "Now is your chance." Sean squared his shoulders. "Let's see if you can keep up." The other warriors gathered to watch, forming a loose circle around them. Their expressions ranged from amusement to curiosity, most clearly expecting Sean to fail. Rihanna's smirk was razor-sharp as she lunged forward, her blade slicing through the air. Sean dodged, his movements quick and deliberate. He'd been watching her for days, studying her style, her patterns. She was fast, but she relied on her opponent's hesitation. "Not bad," Rihanna said as her blade narrowly missed him. "But you'll have to do better than running." Sean didn't reply. Instead, he used her momentum against her, sidestepping and pushing her off balance. It wasn't enough to topple her, but it earned him a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "Clever," she said, regaining her footing. "You're learning." The sparring continued, each strike and dodge drawing the attention of the crowd. Sean's movements were raw, unpolished, but his determination was undeniable. Rihanna's blows grew sharper, her smirk fading into a look of focus. Finally, she swept his legs out from under him, pinning him to the ground with her blade at his throat. Sean's chest heaved, his breath mingling with hers as she leaned close. "Yield?" she asked, her voice low. Sean's gaze burned into hers. "Not a chance." For a moment, neither of them moved. The crowd held its breath, the tension thick enough to cut. Then, slowly, Rihanna withdrew her blade, stepping back and offering him a hand. "You're not as weak as I thought," she said, her tone begrudging but sincere. Sean took her hand, pulling himself to his feet. "And you're not as invincible as you think." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd, some of the warriors nodding in quiet approval. Sean could feel the shift, subtle but undeniable. He wasn't just a curiosity anymore, he was beginning to earn their respect. That evening, Rihanna approached him at the edge of the settlement. The sky was painted with shades of gold and crimson, the alien sun dipping low on the horizon. "Walk with me," she said, her voice softer than usual. Sean followed her into the forest. They reached a small clearing, the trees opening to reveal a sparkling stream. Rihanna crouched by the water, dipping her fingers into the cool current. "You surprised me today," she admitted, her gaze fixed on the rippling surface. Sean sat beside her, his hands resting on his knees. "I told you I wasn't as fragile as you thought." She glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You did. And you were right." The honesty in her voice caught Sean off guard. For the first time, he saw her without the sharp edges, the mocking smirks. She was still fierce, still dominant, but there was a vulnerability in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. "Why do you push so hard?" Sean asked, his tone careful. Rihanna's gaze flickered back to the stream. "Because I have to. Strength is everything here. If you're not strong, you're nothing." "That's what you were taught," Sean said. "But do you really believe that?" She didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "I don't know. Maybe I did once, but now." She looked at him, her dark eyes searching his. "You've made me question things." Sean felt a warmth spread through him, an unspoken connection growing between them. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers. She didn't pull away. "You don't have to prove anything to me," he said. "You're already strong." Her lips parted, as though she wanted to respond, but no words came. Instead, she leaned closer, the space between them shrinking. "Sean," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Before she could say more, a loud, piercing cry shattered the moment. They both shot to their feet, weapons drawn. The sound came again, closer this time, a guttural, inhuman roar. "Rogue warriors," Rihanna said, her voice sharp. "They found us." Sean's heart pounded as the forest came alive with movement. Shadows darted through the trees, the glint of blades catching the fading light. "Stay close to me," Rihanna ordered, her blade flashing as she prepared for the fight. Sean nodded, gripping the hilt of his own weapon. As the first rogue warrior burst into the clearing, he stepped forward, ready to prove once again that he was more than just a fragile human. Rihanna moved like a predator unleashed, her crimson hair whipping behind her as she struck with deadly precision. Her blade was an extension of her, slicing through the air in arcs of shimmering steel. Sean followed her lead, parrying a strike aimed at his chest. The battle was chaos. Sean fought to keep pace with Rihanna, his every movement fueled by survival and determination. His blade caught one attacker off guard, cutting shallow but enough to drive them back. Beside him, Rihanna dispatched another with brutal efficiency, her eyes blazing with focus. When the last rogue fell, the forest fell silent save for the sound of their ragged breaths. Sean leaned against the tree, his chest heaving as he wiped the blood from his blade. "Not bad," Rihanna said, her voice breaking the tension. Sean turned to her, his expression grim. "I think we're past not bad." Her lips twitched, a faint smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "Fair enough." She stepped closer, inspecting him for injuries. Sean stiffened as her fingers brushed his arm, but the gesture was surprisingly gentle. "You're bleeding," she said, her tone softer than he'd ever heard it. "It's nothing," Sean replied, though the cut on his shoulder throbbed painfully. Rihanna rolled her eyes. "Stubborn human," she muttered. She tore a strip of fabric from her tunic and wrapped it around the wound with deft hands. Sean watched her, his pulse quickening for reasons that had nothing to do with the fight. Up close, she was mesmerizing, her fiery hair falling around her face, her dark eyes intense yet tender. "Rihanna," he said, his voice breaking the quiet. She looked up, her gaze locked with his. For a moment, the world around them faded, the forest, the blood, the danger. It was just them, their breaths mingling in the cool night air. "You're not what I expected," Sean admitted, his voice low. Her brow furrowed, but there was no mockery in her expression. "And what did you expect?" "Someone colder," he said. "Someone who wouldn't care if I lived or died." Rihanna's eyes softened, her hand lingering on his shoulder. "You surprised me, too," she confessed. "You're stronger than I thought, braver." Sean's heart raced as her words sank in. He reached up, his hand brushing against hers. "You don't have to keep up the act," he said softly. Rihanna's lips parted, her usual smirk replaced by something raw and vulnerable. "You don't know what you're asking," she murmured. "I think I do," Sean replied, stepping closer. The air between them grew charged, their breaths shallow. Rihanna's eyes searched his, her resolve wavering. "You're impossible," she whispered. Sean smirked. "You like that about me?" Before she could respond, he closed the distance, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was both fierce and tender. For a moment she froze, as though caught off guard. Then, slowly, she melted into him, her hands tangling in his hair as she deepened the kiss. Their passion ignited like a firestorm, raw and unrestrained. Sean pulled her closer, his arms encircling her waist as her body pressed against his. The tension that had simmered between them for days now burned away, replaced by something undeniable. Rihanna pulled back just enough to meet his gaze, her dark eyes blazing. "You're stronger than you look," she teased, her voice husky. Sean smirked, his hands tightening on her hips. "Told you I could handle you." She laughed, a sound that was both challenging and approving. "Don't get cocky, human." Their connection deepened as they explored one another, their bodies and hearts entwining in a way neither had anticipated. It was more than just passion, it was a breaking of barriers, an unspoken acknowledgement of the bond they had forged. Hours passed, the forest around them growing quiet. When they finally pulled apart, their breaths mingling in the cool night air, Rihanna rested her forehead against his. "You're not what I expected either," she admitted, her voice soft. Sean smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Guess we're both full of surprises." For the first time, Rihanna's smirk softened into a genuine smile. "I suppose we are." The morning sun crept through the camp canopy, casting dappled light on the forest floor. Sean awoke with a start, the events of the night before washing over him in vivid detail. Beside him, Rihanna sat perched on a fallen log, sharpening her blade. Her crimson hair glowed in the sunlight, and though her expression was as fierce as ever, there was a noticeable softness in her posture. She glanced at him as he stirred, a smirk tugging at her lips. "You survived the night. Impressive." Sean chuckled, stretching his sore muscles. "You didn't make it easy." Rihanna laughed, the sound light and genuine. It was the first time Sean had heard her laugh without mockery, and it stirred something deep within him. "What happens now?" he asked, standing and dusting himself off. Her smirk faded, replaced by a thoughtful expression. "Now we return to the settlement. But things will be different." Sean raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" Rihanna hesitated, her gaze flickering away. "My people won't accept this easily. To them, strength is everything, and you're still seen as an outsider." Sean stepped closer, his hand brushing hers. "Then we'll prove them wrong. Together." Her dark eyes met his, filled with a mix of resolve and uncertainty. "You're a stubborn human," she said softly. "And you're a stubborn warrior," he replied with a grin. "Guess that makes us a good match." Rihanna's lips twitched into a reluctant smile. "Perhaps." When they returned to the settlement, the atmosphere was tense. The warriors eyed them with suspicion, their gazes lingering on the subtle closeness between Sean and Rihanna. Whispers spread like wildfire, and it wasn't long before one of the senior warriors stepped forward to confront them. Rihanna, the warrior said, his tone heavy with disapproval, you've brought shame to us. Sean bristled, but Rihanna raised a hand to stop him. Explain, she demanded, her voice cold and commanding. You've aligned yourself with a human, the warrior sneered, a weak, fragile creature who doesn't belong among us. Sean clenched his fists, but before he could speak, Rihanna stepped forward. Enough, she snapped, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Sean has proven himself in battle. He's braver than any of you give him credit for, and I will not tolerate your disrespect. The crowd fell silent, stunned by her outburst. Rihanna's fiery gaze swept over them, daring anyone to challenge her. He's earned his place here, she continued, her tone unwavering. And if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me. The warriors exchanged uneasy glances, none willing to confront her directly. Sean watched her, a mixture of pride and admiration swelling in his chest. Very well, the senior warrior said finally, though his tone was laced with contempt. But don't expect him to last. Rihanna's jaw tightened, but she said nothing as the warrior turned and walked away. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving Sean and Rihanna standing alone. You didn't have to do that, Sean said, his voice quiet. Yes, I did, Rihanna replied, her expression softening as she looked at him. You're not just fighting for yourself anymore. You're fighting for us. Sean nodded, determination hardening in his gaze. Then let's show them what we're capable of. Over the next several days, Sean and Rihanna worked together to prove their strength to the settlement. Sean joined the warriors in their daily training, pushing himself harder than ever. Though his body ached and his muscles burned, he refused to give up. Rihanna, meanwhile, began to change as well. She softened in small but significant ways, offering Sean guidance instead of mockery and standing by his side when others doubted him. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, the once hostile tension between them replaced by mutual respect and something deeper. It wasn't long before they were put to the ultimate test. A scout returned to the settlement with dire news. A rival faction of warriors was preparing to attack, their numbers far greater than expected. We'll need every able fighter, the senior warrior said during the council meeting, his gaze lingering on Sean with thinly veiled disdain. Sean stood, his jaw set. I'll fight. The room erupted into murmurs, but Rihanna silenced them with a sharp glare. He's proven himself before, she said. And he'll do it again. The senior warrior sneered. If he dies, it's on you. Rihanna stepped closer, her eyes blazing. Then he won't die. Sean placed a hand on her arm, drawing her attention. I can handle this, he said quietly. She searched his face, her expression softening. I know you can. The days leading up to the battle were a blur of preparation. Sean trained relentlessly, honing his skills under Rihanna's watchful eye. Though the other warriors still doubted him, he felt their disdain begin to waver as they witnessed his determination. The night before the battle, Sean and Rihanna stood together at the edge of the settlement, gazing out at the dark forest. Are you ready? Rihanna asked, her voice quiet. Sean nodded. As ready as I'll ever be. She turned to him, her expression serious. If anything happens tomorrow. Don't, Sean interrupted, placing a hand on her cheek. Nothing's going to happen. We'll get through this together. Her gaze softened, and for a moment, she let her guard down. You're impossible, she murmured. And you wouldn't have it any other way, Sean replied with a grin. Rihanna laughed softly, the sound warming Sean's heart. As they stood there, the weight of tomorrow's battle pressing down on them, they found strength in each other. The air was heavy with tension as Sean tightened his grip on his blade, standing shoulder to shoulder with Rihanna at the edge of the settlement. The enemy forces were approaching, their guttural cries echoing through the forest. The rival faction had brought dozens of warriors, each armed to the teeth and radiating menace. Sean glanced at Rihanna. She usually radiated an unshakable confidence in moments like this, but something about her seemed off. Her dark eyes were distant, her jaw tight, and the hand gripping her blade trembled ever so slightly. "You good?" Sean asked, keeping his voice low. Rihanna blinked, snapping out of her daze. "I'm fine," she said quickly, though her tone lacked its usual conviction. Sean frowned but didn't press her. This wasn't the time for questions. The enemy was almost upon them. "Stick close," she said, her voice firm despite the uncertainty in her gaze. Sean nodded, stepping into formation beside her as the warriors of the settlement braced for the attack. The battle erupted in a whirlwind of chaos. Steel clashed against steel, and the air was filled with the shouts of warriors and the guttural cries of the wounded. Sean fought with everything he had, dodging, parrying, and striking back with relentless determination. Beside him, Rihanna was a blur of movement, her crimson hair whipping around her as her blade sliced through the air. But something was wrong. Her strikes lacked their usual precision, her reactions slower than they should have been. Sean noticed it first when a rogue warrior broke through her defenses, their blade grazing her arm. Rihanna stumbled back, her expression dazed. "Rihanna!" Sean shouted, slashing at the rogue warrior and driving them back. "I'm fine," she said through gritted teeth, but Sean could see the strain in her eyes. The fight raged on, and the enemy pressed harder, their numbers threatening to overwhelm the defenders. Sean stayed close to Rihanna, his every move calculated to protect her blind spots. Then it happened. Rihanna hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for an enemy to seize the opening. A towering rogue warrior lunged at her with a spear, the weapon aimed straight for her heart. Sean's instincts took over. He threw himself in front of her, knocking the spear aside with his blade. The force of the blow sent him sprawling, but he rolled to his feet just in time to intercept another strike. "Sean, no." Rihanna's voice was sharp with panic as she struggled to regain her footing. Sean didn't reply. He focused on the enemy, every ounce of his strength and determination poured into the fight. The rogue warrior was strong, their blows hammering against his defenses, but Sean held firm. With a final, desperate strike, he drove his blade into their chest, sending them crumpling to the ground. He turned to Rihanna, his chest heaving. She was still on her knees, her blade hanging limply in her hand. "Rihanna, what's wrong with you?" Sean demanded, helping her to her feet. "You're not yourself." Her eyes darted away, shame flickering across her face. I don't know," she said, her voice barely audible. Sean didn't have time to press her. The battle wasn't over yet. "Stay with me," he said, gripping her shoulder. "We'll get through this together." She nodded, her expression unreadable, and they plunged back into the fight. By the time the battle ended, the settlement was battered but victorious. The ground was littered with the bodies of fallen warriors, and the survivors moved among them, tending to the wounded and securing the area. Sean and Rihanna stood at the edge of the clearing, their weapons lowered. Sean's body ached, his muscles screaming in protest, but his focus was on Rihanna. She hadn't said a word since the fight ended, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Rihanna," Sean said gently, placing a hand on her arm. "Talk to me. What's going on?" She hesitated, her body tense. For a moment, Sean thought she might brush him off again, but then she sighed, her shoulders slumping. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling. Sean waited, his concern growing. Rihanna turned to face him, her dark eyes filled with a vulnerability he'd never seen before. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sean stared at her, the weight of her words crashing down on him. "You're what?" "Pregnant," she repeated, her gaze searching his face for a reaction. "That's why I've been different. Slower. Weaker." She looked away, shame flickering across her features. "I've never felt this way before. Vulnerable. It almost cost me my life, and yours." Sean stepped closer, cupping her face in his hands. "Rihanna, listen to me. You're not weak. You're carrying something incredible, our child. That doesn't make you vulnerable. It makes you stronger. Her eyes widened, tears glistening in the corners. You really believe that? I do, Sean said firmly. And I'll be here every step of the way. We'll face this together, just like everything else. Rihanna let out a shaky breath, leaning into his touch. You're impossible, she murmured, her lips twitching into a faint smile. And you wouldn't have it any other way, Sean replied with a grin. For the first time since the battle, Rihanna laughed softly, the sound warming Sean's heart. She placed a hand on her abdomen, her expression a mix of wonder and determination. This child will change everything, she said quietly. Sean wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. Then let's make it a change worth fighting for. As they stood together, the sun breaking through the trees and casting a golden glow over the settlement, Sean knew their journey was far from over. But with Rihanna by his side and their future growing within her, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.